is the adoption of the agenda. So does anyone have any discussion on the agenda item? All right, all in favor of adopting the agenda, please say aye.
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 All right, thank you. All right, next thing is Ms. London, would you please read the equity statement?
Columbia Public Schools, through action and in partnership with families and community, will uphold the values, policies, and practices that promote cultural competence. We will accept, embrace, and empower students and staff in their individual identities to establish and sustain human dignity, justice, and equitable treatment and inclusiveness in the classroom and workplace.
Thank you. Next thing on the agenda is the approval of minutes from previous meeting. Does anyone have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes from February meeting.
Second?
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on this one? All right, perfect. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, perfect, thank you. All right, next thing, we're just buzzing down the list, is policies for review without changes. Does anybody have a motion?
I move that we accept the series of policies listed with no changes, review no changes, accept those as correct.
Do we have a second? Okay,
I second.
all right.
We'll still have discussion, right, because I have a question.
Yeah. So go ahead if you want to have a discussion item.
Well, I just,
Thank you.
Oh,
You're off. You just turned it off. There you
am
go.
I on now?
Yep.
Yep.
you're on.
But I lost my question, so give me just 2 seconds, sorry.
So,
Anything else?
yeah, I'll add to that. These are all policies. The most recent one was revised in 2013, and the rest go back from there. All of these are identical or substantially identical to what the current MSBA core policies are.
Good time. That was a perfect time filler. Okay, so my first was, I just had a question about this, and maybe it's a little bit silly, but in policy EEAB, which is the school bus scheduling and routing. So I will just say, as an overall comment, this is a very vague policy. And there's a lot of words on the page, but when it comes down to it, as a parent who's tried to change the bus for their child because of strange situations like, oh, though that turnaround's the easiest turnaround, so that's why your child has to walk 8 blocks or whatever. It's not a very meaningful policy. But my question is simply, in the last paragraph, we require notes. And again, I'm not a huge fan of policies that require things that we don't do. And I don't think that notes are actually required for students to ride on different buses, in my experience. But maybe that's just been my experience. And so I'm just curious whether, are we talking about notes? Are we talking about an email? Are we talking about anything that qualifies in that way? And is that something that is the norm, that there is this note that has to be done for a kid to ride home with your friend for the day?
So my experience as a parent has been a note of some sort. And typically for me, that was sending an email. Sometimes I would write it and send it in with my child, but also follow up with an email. Because I do know also, I believe there's been cases where if a kid doesn't have a note, because the school usually gives the kid a note to get on the bus that they don't normally ride. And if they don't have that note, the bus driver doesn't have to let them on either.
So I'll just assume that, some of the
There's some
experience
procedure.
have been anecdotal and not the norm then. But so I was just curious if that was the norm. It sounds like it is. It hasn't always been in situations that I've been aware of. And then my next question is about policy FF, facility names. And I was just wondering what the reasoning is between why individual parts of a school building or campus should not be named separately from the total school complex. I was just curious because one thing that we've done at the university is that's allowed us to have more diversity, more women schools named after women, things like that, is if we can have like an atrium or a this named after somebody who's maybe doesn't get all the votes, but has some importance. So I was just curious why we have that and what people think about that.
So historically, and I may not be the best person to answer this, I think Michelle Baumstark could probably give more context, but historically it's been that it would be more confusing to have parts of the building named separately. We are a smaller entity than a university that may have different parts of the building. So it's just always been, it has one name, so it's not confusing. Does my child go to this school? Do they go to this school? It could also be for DESE reporting purposes.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Those are my only two questions.
Okay, perfect. Any other discussion on these items? All right. So all in favor of approving these without change, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that passes.
And I think Marjorie's voting, but she's muted, so
Oh.
I've seen her,
Did she say aye?
I've seen her say it.
Okay, I saw her
Sorry.
shaking her head.
Aye, yes.
Okay. All right, so we have 3 items of unfinished business. I'm going to ask that BCE and KK be moved to the next agenda, and the reason for that is that BCE, the Board of Education, will be discussing BCE in the work session, so it's a little premature for this committee to be discussing that. And then Policy KK still has some issues that were not addressed from the previous month, so we need to move it to the next month so that we can all look at it, review it, and get some edits in, and hopefully I understand that administration also wants to make some changes based on a contract that the Board of Education will be approving this month, if I'm not mistaken. On Thursday, and in which case this may go into May for the first edit because of the contract that we will be approving, and there will need to be some changes based on that contract. So just that we're moving it to the next agenda to April for both of them. And then we may have to move one of them again.
Or we may take up,
or-
it may end up being one that we discuss multiple months like we have
I'm going to
some
assume.
of our other policies.
I'm
So
gonna
that we can
assume
all
given the-
collaborate and come to,
Yes, I'm assuming given the number of emails I've received this week that we could end up discussing KK multiple
a couple of months at least. Okay.
So the last thing on the agenda, this was moved to the agenda from last month because there needed to be some changes because the policy last month had district-wide prevention teams, and my understanding based on the presentation last time was that we have building prevention teams, and so the policy needed to be amended some for that reason, and so it was moved to today. So does anyone have a motion?
I move that we accept policy JHDF as presented.
All right, do we have a second?
Second?
All right, is there any other discussion? Because I'm looking at this, it looks like it was edited based on what we discussed last time. So do you have anything that we need to say about it?
I did have a question on the bottom of page 1, and this is probably just maybe a typo or language area, but in that first paragraph under building response team, it says each building will establish a district level crisis response team, but we've already changed it to building response team. And then it says, if practical, a team in each building. I think that just maybe wasn't caught when we made the changes based on building versus district. So I think it would make more sense if it just said, each building will establish a response team, right? And that
Marjorie, I picked up
building
on the same
response team
thing.
members.
Yep.
And I believe so. Mrs. London, you want to chime in on that piece of it?
Yeah, I think Dr. Dream A. Williams is correct. I think that's just an editing error. So each building will establish a crisis response team. I think that would be sufficient for that first sentence.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch all of that.
Oh, sorry. I said I think you were correct, and that was just an editing issue. So if that sentence read that each building will establish a CRT or crisis response team, then that would be sufficient for that first sentence.
I have another one.
Okay, so
okay.
can we have a motion to amend?
How do we want to amend it?
I move to amend the first sentence in the paragraph under building response team to say each building will establish a crisis response team.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, any other discussion
On the amendment?
on the amendment? Yeah.
This is where I was going next.
Well, I think in this one, the building, let's see.
We have
I'm
a
looking here.
definition of building response team BRT, a definition of district crisis response team DCRT. We don't have a definition of CRT, crisis response team,
You're right.
which,
So
you
it's
know,
a BRT.
So instead of the word crisis, it should say building.
because we've marked out crisis
Right.
in that heading to building response team. So each building will establish a building response team or a BRT. Is that what it should say, Dr. Carla?
I would think so. I'm wondering why Molly or Susan, we have to look at our notes here for a second, why they wouldn't just call it a building crisis. It's like they call it, we have mentioned district crisis response team, why
No,
not
it'd be a
building crisis
BCRT.
response team? Right. That seems to make the most sense. Yes? I'm looking at you, Grant's like, sure. I would, so for consistency's sake, since we do have the DCRT, I like the BCRT, Building Crisis Response Team.
Yeah,
Is that
that,
what work?
it goes to that consistency.
Yes.
So then you need a motion that everything that says BRT should be changed to BCRT.
That would be correct. Paul, do we need to say that formally?
Well, and so right now the motion is about this first sentence. So it sounds like what we're saying is that this motion should be each building will establish a building crisis response team, and then we can deal with the other issue after that.
Yes.
Right.
Marjorie,
Yes,
do you
yes,
have any?
there is,
Oh.
yeah, there is a district crisis response team, but it's more sort of loosely held. We've been talking about that for the last week, so I agree that, we need to firm it up by having a building crisis response team. That is an excellent plan to be on the ground.
Yes.
Okay, so Marjorie, do you have any problem with changing your motion to be building crisis response team?
Nope, not at all. It was more just a question about consistency.
Okay. So all in favor of changing that sentence to each building will establish a building crisis response team, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. All right, so now I understand there's a discussion because this was changed to BRT, but I think you're wanting to say CBRT,
Oh, BCRT.
BCRT. Okay. Okay, so let's have that discussion then, and then we can make a motion once we figure out exactly what we're talking about, because it's not clear in my head yet.
Sure. So I think we were saying just for consistency's sake, since we have the DCRT, meaning the District Crisis Response Team, to make that clear delineation, we have a Building Crisis Response Team then, so a BCRT.
So under definitions, we'll need to change it from building response team to building crisis response team, and then it will say in parentheses BCRT.
Correct.
And then each instance of BRT shall be changed to BCRT throughout the policy.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
However
So
you'd like to motion that
that's
out.
what I'm trying. That's why I wanted to make sure I got this clear in my head before we did a motion. So let me write this out, and I think I can do the motion then. And it's building crisis response team, right?
Yes.
Okay, tell me if this is correct. I move to change the definition of building response team to building crisis response team and change the initials BRT to BCRT throughout the document.
Yes, I think.
Second.
All right. Is there any further discussion on that? Go ahead. You need to turn it back on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Man, you think with all my degrees I could manage a microphone? This is going to seem like a ridiculous question, but I honestly can't tell from the language. Is the building crisis response team in a particular building supposed to include the administrators, counselors, and school nurse from that building or from anywhere in the district?
So it's typically from that building for sure. There are occasions where, depending on the nature of the situation or if it's really large, that they may call in assistance from another building. But this is to imply that each building will specifically have their team of response people.
So each building will establish a building crisis response team. Then it says CRT, but that should be BCRT.
Right, yes.
Members will include administrators, counselors, and school nurse, but nowhere does it say from that building. And up here, when we define building crisis response team, it just says a team of district employees.
That's a good point.
So I'm not clear that those have to be from that building. I guess you could infer that, but maybe you could just add BCRT members will include administrators, counselors, and school nurse. Or maybe in the definition, a team of district employees within a building.
A team of building employees.
Yeah, I think that previously was listed that way as a definition because the definition was building
But now it says
crisis.
district
But
employees.
now it's building crisis response, and then we've added the district crisis response team. So I think this could say a team of building employees.
You could say a team of building specific employees
Okay.
or building
So,
employees.
so let's put a pin in that for a second.
Sorry.
No. But so the motion on the floor is to change building response team to building crisis response team and BRT throughout. Is there any other discussion on that point? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so now I'm hearing the next motion is to add something about from that building, somewhere in here to make it clear that the
To-
district employees in the definition are from that building.
To change the definition to a team of building-specific employees trained in suicide awareness, intervention, and prevention. Is that correct, Ann?
I mean, I think I'm not good at writing language on the fly, but I'm good at recognizing
No.
problems on the fly. I think that would be fine.
But I'm
Great.
also looking
think
at
that-
this when we're talking about the building response team can include the definition in the definitions is a little different than the statement of what the building response team is below in that district employees, but it can also include community members and school resource officers.
And we're still calling them CRT in that paragraph.
Yeah, I know.
Did that include-
that'll-
is that included in
we'll
your
need-
motion?
We'll
Okay.
need to make sure we change CRT.
Yeah, that was included.
But is that, do we think that's consistent with the definition?
Well, the way I look at it is the building, this is the way I'm interpreting it. The building crisis response team is building-specific employees trained in suicide awareness. And those employees are the administrators, the counselors, and the school nurse from the building. There may, depending on the situation, may need to be have some other people involved in that team. But the core of that team has to be at minimum this. Would that make
That's
sense?
yes, that's how I was reading it.
Because like you were giving the example of something really large, but if you have one of our particularly small schools, we may not have homeschool communicators, social workers. We may not have some of those staff positions specific to those buildings
Correct.
as well.
Okay, so then that implies to me that the definition should just say a team of building employees trained in suicide awareness, intervention, and prevention. And then we wouldn't need to change then the lower section that says may also include.
No, I don't think so.
Correct.
Okay, so I think then the motion is to change the word district to building in the definition of building crisis response team. So do I have a motion?
I move that we amend the definition of building crisis response team to state a team of building employees trained in suicide awareness, intervention, and prevention.
Okay, is there a second?
Second?
All right, any other discussion? And we'll give Ann just a few minutes because I know she's looking at something, so. Okay. All right, so is there any other discussion?
Yes.
No, on this motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we voted.
All right, so all in favor of changing the word district to building in that definition, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Dr. Yearwood was muted, I'm assuming just thumbs up, Dr. Yearwood? Okay, all right. So, April?
Okay, on page 2, response plan, then we have students who may be at risk of suicide. Not the first set of 2, but the next set, it says when a CRT member received notification. And so that was something I picked up on throughout this because I wasn't sure if that word CRT, you were referencing the building response team or the district response team. So yep, there too. I mean,
Okay. Well,
does that make sense? Do you see where I'm? So when I was reading through all these changes today before we've made all these other changes, I was like, okay, well, we don't have a definition of CRT. So which one was this intended to apply towards? So that probably needs to be looked at to determine whether or not that needs to be BCRT or DCRT. I'm going to assume it's BCRT, but under response plan, it says district's employees will respond immediately. Of course, district employees should always respond immediately. It doesn't, if they know something, so.
So it looks like in the notes that Susan Perkins had originally sent for item number 3, that she wanted that changed to BRT. So that would now become the BCRT. When a building crisis response team member receives notification.
I think that's also, the same is true for 2 instances of CRT on page 1 also. Looking at this. In the paragraph that we changed under building response team, there's 2 instances of CRT.
Right, although when we changed those, I assumed those would be BCRT.
That's correct.
Right, which are under a separate heading called response plan, not.
I see what you're,
I guess at this point, my question is, should this go back to administration to go back and make sure we've got all the correct initials lined up and the correct definitions to the right paragraphs?
yeah, who was the one who made the original motion?
Yes. Yeah. That's a good suggestion, April, because what we don't want to put in policy is something that we don't have, or all of a sudden we're scrambling to create. So let us relook. I would recommend we relook at that policy with administration and then bring it back to policy committee.
Yeah,
to
I
make
think it
it
just
cleaner.
needs some polishing
All right.
is all, but I
Yeah.
agree.
I
Yes.
totally agree. And so
Yeah.
April, can you withdraw your motion?
I would
please?
like to withdraw my motion to approve JHDF
All right.
as
In
presented.
that,
Can
in that
I,
case,
can
oh,
I
go ahead.
add one
Yeah,
additional
oh,
paragraph
yeah,
that I just want to make
let's-
sure that they have a look at?
Yes.
Because I don't understand at all.
Absolutely.
So administration, when you send it back to wherever it goes, at the bottom of page one, it's like a magic box. We send it back, I don't know what happens. At the bottom of page one, that final paragraph, I'm really unclear on who is doing what and why that paragraph appears now under the building crisis response team, because there seem to be district things in there and there seem to be building things in there, and it's just not clear to me. So just have another look at that paragraph specifically if possible.
Right, because it says the district will
Right.
use evidence-based, and then if the district has a behavioral risk assessment team, there might be a
Yeah.
team.
It's just, I'm unclear what happens in that scenario from reading the paragraph.
So that one could almost be titled Crisis Response Teams and then delineate underneath.
Yeah, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure.
Could be.
Looks like for most of the rest of those, from the previous conversation, that our counselors had put in BRT, meaning that they wanted those to be the building response team. So we can go back and,
Okay. All right, so is everybody, does everybody believe it's acceptable to send this back to administration to put onto the April agenda with the other unfinished business? Does anyone have an issue?
Do we need to make a motion?
No, yeah, we're explicitly just moving it to the next, and we're doing.
It's just
we're doing it
unfinished
by
business.
We're doing it by acclamation.
We just keep having unfinished business.
So this was a short agenda. We are through the agenda. I don't think we have anything more. We do have an April meeting, and I believe we at least have a May meeting set, and we'll most likely have a June meeting also of this committee.
I hope that we will consider, I mean, everybody knows I'm obsessed. It's not a secret. And so there's 300 plus policies that the board has, and I would hope, just because the kids are out of school for the summer doesn't mean there's not work to be done. So I would hope that maybe we consider doing some meeting over the summer, even if it's just to review some of the light changes that, might not need a bunch of discussion and work.
And like I said, my understanding is that KK may not be fully ready until June.
True.
Based on what administration has told me. So we will definitely need that June meeting at the very least. So I think we will be meeting through June. And then, of course, April or July, we may need to be picking our community members for August and moving forward. So
just for historical context, most committees do not meet in June and July.
Right.
Those are very difficult to get.
understood,
there, so.
understood. But I've already been told that administration may need until June to finalize KK. So
Hopefully
that
May
really
will be
doesn't
ready.
give us a choice. So. All
Yeah,
right.
it's been kind of hit or miss over the last couple of years.
Right.
There's been some that have.
All right. So do we have a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you all.